Tucker's key turned in the lock at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same way it had every Tuesday for the past 3 years since he'd graduated college and moved back into his childhood home temporarily. The temporarily had stretched longer than he'd planned, but his parents had insisted. Save your money, his mother had said warmly. Build your nest egg. Family takes care of family. He believed them, trusted them, loved them for their generosity. The door swung open to silence. Not the comfortable silence of an empty house, but the wrong kind of silence, hollow, echoing, final. Tucker stepped inside, his work bag sliding from his shoulder as his brain struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. The living room was empty. Not just unoccupied. Empty. The couch where his father watched golf tournaments every weekend, gone. The antique coffee table his mother had inherited from her grandmother, gone. The family photos that had lined the mantel, gone. Even the curtains had been stripped from the windows, leaving naked glass reflecting the dying sunlight. Mom. His voice cracked on the word. Dad. He moved through the house like a ghost, his footsteps echoing on bare hardwood floors. The dining room, empty. His parents' bedroom, stripped clean, not even a hanger left in the closet. His own room remained untouched, a bizarre island of normalcy in a house that had been gutted. His childhood bed, his desk, his posters from high school, all exactly as he'd left them this morning. But everything else, every trace of his parents' 30-year residence in this house, had been erased. On the kitchen counter, weighted down by his father's old coffee mug, the one item they'd left behind, sat a single piece of paper. Tucker's hands trembled as he picked it up, his eyes scanning the neat handwriting he'd known his entire life. His mother's handwriting. The words were brief, clinical, devastating in their simplicity. Tucker, by the time you read this, will be in Panama. We've made the decision to start a new chapter in our lives, and we need to do this on our own terms. The house is paid off. It's yours now. We've transferred it to your name. Everything else, we've liquidated to fund our retirement abroad. Don't try to contact us. We need space to build this new life. You're 25 years old. You're capable. You're smart. It's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. We love you, and we know you'll understand eventually. This is what's best for everyone. Mom and Dad. Tucker read it 3 times. Then 4. Then he stopped counting because the words weren't making sense, weren't arranging themselves into anything resembling logic or love or sanity. Panama. Liquidated everything. Don't contact us. The phrases floated in his mind like debris after an explosion, impossible to assemble into coherent meaning. His phone was in his hand before he consciously decided to call. His mother's number rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Her voice, warm and familiar, asking him to leave a message. He couldn't speak, couldn't form words. Hung up and tried his father. Same result. Voicemail. He tried his mother again. Voicemail. His father again. Voicemail. 6 more times, each call more desperate than the last, until he was standing in the empty living room shouting at his phone. Pick up, damn it. You don't get to just leave a note and disappear. But they did get to. They had. They were gone. The trust fund. The thought hit him like cold water. His grandparents had set up a trust fund when he was born. $250,000 meant for his future, for a house down payment, for starting a business, for security. His parents had been trustees. We're managing it for you, his father had always said. Keeping it safe until you're ready to use it wisely. Tucker stumbled to his laptop, his fingers clumsy on the keys as he logged into the trust account. Loading. The page refreshed. Balance, $0. He stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. 0. $250,000 gone. His inheritance from grandparents who'd worked their entire lives to give him a foundation. Vanished. He clicked through transaction history with mounting horror. Multiple withdrawals over the past 6 months. 50,000 here. 75,000 there. The final withdrawal, just 3 days ago, had cleaned out the remaining balance. The destination for all transfers, Banco Nacional de Panama. Tucker's chest constricted. He couldn't breathe right, couldn't pull in enough air. They'd planned this. For months. While he'd been living under their roof, eating dinners they'd cooked, laughing at his father's terrible jokes, hugging his mother goodnight. They'd been systematically dismantling his future and planning their escape. Every withdrawal had been legal. They were trustees. They had full access. And they'd taken everything. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. He opened it with shaking hands. Tucker, it's Mom. I know you're upset. But try to understand. We spent our whole lives taking care of you. Now it's our turn to live. You're young. You'll bounce back. We needed this money to start fresh. One day you'll see we did this for your own good. Making you independent. Making you strong. Don't be angry. Be grateful for the lesson. We love you. Don't try to call. We've changed our numbers. Tucker read the message until his vision went blurry with tears he refused to let fall. Did this for your own good. Making you independent. The gaslighting was almost impressive in its audacity. They'd stolen his inheritance, abandoned him without warning, and were now reframing theft and betrayal as a gift. As a lesson in independence. As love. He wanted to scream. Wanted to throw his phone through the empty living room window. Wanted to wake up and discover this was a nightmare, some stress-induced fever dream. But he didn't wake up. This was real. His parents, the people who'd raised him, who'd taught him right from wrong, who'd preached about family loyalty and integrity, had robbed him blind and fled the country. Tucker sank to the floor of his childhood home, surrounded by the ghosts of furniture that used to be there, and let the magnitude of his abandonment wash over him. They were gone. His money was gone. And he was completely, utterly, devastatingly alone. Tucker spent that first night on his bedroom floor, too shocked to move, too numb to process. He'd called his fiancée, Claire, at midnight, his voice hollow as he explained what happened. Her response had been silence, the long, uncomfortable kind, followed by, "I need to think about this, Tucker. This is a lot." Then she'd hung up. He'd stared at his phone, adding her reaction to the growing list of betrayals, before finally falling into fitful sleep around 4 a.m. Morning came with harsh sunlight and the crushing confirmation that yesterday had been real. Tucker dragged himself to the bathroom, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed stranger in the mirror. His phone showed 7 missed calls, all from Claire, but he couldn't deal with her yet. Not until he understood the full scope of the disaster. He made coffee using the ancient coffee maker his parents had left behind and Googled family trust theft lawyer with trembling fingers. The first attorney he called listened to his story with professional sympathy and quoted him a $5,000 retainer. Tucker thanked him and hung up. He had $800 in his checking account. The second lawyer was cheaper but blunt. If they were legal trustees and you're over 18, this is going to be very difficult to prosecute. The trust documents would need to explicitly limit their access to the funds. Tucker's heart sank. He didn't even have copies of the trust documents. The third call was to Gerald Morrison, a family law attorney his college roommate had recommended. Gerald's secretary scheduled an emergency consultation for that afternoon. Tucker spent the intervening hours searching the house for any documentation about the trust, about the house transfer, about anything that might help him understand what legal ground he stood on. He found nothing. They'd been thorough. Gerald Morrison's office was in a modest building downtown, the kind of place that suggested competence without pretension. Gerald himself was in his 60s, with kind eyes and the weathered expression of someone who'd seen humanity at its worst, and somehow maintained his faith in it anyway. He listened to Tucker's story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, his expression growing more grave with each detail. "I need you to understand something right away," Gerald said when Tucker finished. "This is going to be an uphill battle. If your parents were designated trustees with broad discretionary powers, which is standard for these family trusts, they likely had legal authority to make withdrawals for the benefit of the beneficiary. The question becomes whether draining the entire trust and fleeing to Panama falls under that definition." Tucker felt sick. So they might get away with it? Just take everything and face no consequences. Gerald's expression softened with something like pity. "The legal system moves slowly, Tucker. Panama has banking privacy laws that make it very difficult to recover funds. Even if we could prove misappropriation, which would require extensive documentation and potentially years of litigation, actually getting the money back from a foreign account would be nearly impossible without their cooperation." "They stole from me," Tucker said, his voice breaking. "My own parents stole my inheritance and abandoned me, and you're telling me there's nothing I can do?" Gerald was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I'm telling you that legal recourse may not give you what you want, when you want it, but there are steps we can take. I can file a complaint with the probate court, petition to freeze any remaining assets, potentially pursue criminal charges for fraud if we can prove they misrepresented their intentions. But Tucker," he leaned forward, his expression earnest, Even if we win, even if a court rules in your favor, collecting that judgment from Panama could take a decade. Maybe longer. Maybe never. The weight of it crushed Tucker. He'd lost not just his inheritance, but any realistic chance of recovering it. His parents had planned this perfectly, had chosen a country with banking secrecy laws specifically designed to protect assets from foreign claims. They'd known exactly what they were doing. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a breakdown. This was premeditated theft disguised as tough love. What about the house? Tucker asked, grasping for anything solid. They said they transferred it to my name. Gerald made a note. I'll need to verify that at the county recorder's office. If they did transfer the deed, at least you have a roof over your head. But Tucker, he paused, his tone gentle but firm. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that they encumbered the property. Took out a mortgage or a home equity line of credit before transferring it. We've seen that kind of thing before. Tucker's stomach dropped. Of course they might have done that. Why leave him anything of value? He thanked Gerald numbly, agreed to a payment plan for the retainer since he couldn't afford it up front, and walked out of the office feeling like he'd been hollowed out. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Claire. We need to talk. Tonight. The words felt ominous, final. He drove home, if it even was his home, and found an email waiting from his mother's new address. The subject line read, You'll understand one day. Tucker's hand hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. He opened it. The message was long, rambling, full of justifications and rationalizations that made his skin crawl. Tucker, I know you're angry, but your father and I sacrificed everything for you. We put our dreams on hold for 25 years. We stayed in jobs we hated, in a town we'd outgrown, in a life that had become suffocating. The trust fund was sitting there, doing nothing, when we needed it to finally live. You're young. You have time to rebuild. We don't. One day, when you have children of your own, you'll understand that parents are people too. We deserve happiness. We deserve freedom. This wasn't about hurting you. This was about saving ourselves. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Let us go. Move on. Build your own life. We believe in you. We always have. Love, Mom. Tucker read the email 3 times, each reading making him angrier. The narcissism. The audacity. The complete inability to see that what they'd done was theft, not liberation. That abandoning your child and stealing their inheritance wasn't self-care. It was betrayal. He typed a response, fingers flying across the keyboard with rage. You didn't sacrifice for me. You made choices like every parent makes. I didn't ask to be born. That was your decision. And stealing my inheritance to fund your midlife crisis isn't brave or justified. It's criminal. You're cowards. And I will never, ever forgive you for this. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then blocked her email address. Let them live in their Panama paradise with their stolen money and their twisted justifications. He was done. He had to be done because the alternative was spending the rest of his life waiting for an apology that would never come, an explanation that would never make sense, a restoration that would never happen. Tucker closed his laptop and stared at the empty room around him, feeling the full weight of his new reality settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. He was 25, broke, abandoned, and utterly alone. And somehow, he had to figure out how to survive. Claire showed up at 7 p.m., right on time, which Tucker had always loved about her. Her punctuality, her reliability, her steadiness. Now, watching her park her car through the bare living room window, those qualities felt ominous. Steady people didn't stay with men whose entire lives had imploded overnight. Reliable people made reliable choices, like leaving before the ship sank completely. She knocked even though she had a key, which told Tucker everything he needed to know before she even opened her mouth. He let her in, and she stood in the empty living room with the kind of careful posture people use in museums. Hands clasped, shoulders tight, eyes taking in the absence of everything that used to make this house a home. Tucker, she said softly, and the pity in her voice made him want to scream. Don't, he said, his voice harder than he intended. Just say whatever you came to say. Claire's eyes filled with tears, which surprised him. He'd expected cold calculation, not emotion. I can't do this, she whispered. I'm so sorry, but I can't do this. Tucker laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Can't do what? Can't support your fiancé through a crisis? Can't handle the fact that I'm not secretly wealthy anymore. That's not fair, Claire shot back, her tears spilling over. This isn't about money. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me. The accusation hit him like a slap. Lying? Claire, I found out about this yesterday. How could I have been lying? She pulled out her phone, turned it toward him. On the screen was a text conversation with her best friend, Rachel. Tucker's eyes scanned the messages, his stomach churning with each line. Rachel, did you know Tucker's family went bankrupt? Claire, what? No. He never said anything. Rachel, my mom works at the bank. His parents cleaned out everything and left town. Apparently Tucker's been living there rent-free because he's broke too. Claire, oh my God. He told me he was saving for our wedding. Rachel, hon, I'm sorry, but you need to protect yourself. If he's been lying about his finances, what else is he lying about? Tucker looked up from the phone, rage and betrayal warring in his chest. I wasn't lying. I didn't know any of this. And I do have wedding savings. I've been putting away money every month like we agreed. Check my account. I'll show you the statements right now. But Claire was shaking her head, backing toward the door. It doesn't matter. Even if you didn't know, Tucker, this is too much. Your parents stole from you and fled the country. That's insane. That's not normal family drama. That's criminal, and it's going to follow you forever. I can't tie my life to that kind of chaos. So that's it. Tucker's voice cracked. 3 years together, and you're gone because of something my parents did? Something I had no control over. Claire was crying openly now, mascara streaking her cheeks. I'm 24 years old. I want stability. I want a partner who can help me build a future, not someone I have to rescue from his own family. This is too much baggage, Tucker. I'm not strong enough to carry it with you. She pulled the engagement ring off her finger, the modest diamond he'd saved for 6 months to afford, and set it on the window ledge. I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't marry you. Not now. Maybe not ever. You need to figure out your life, and I need to protect mine. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Tucker stood frozen, staring at the ring glinting in the lamplight, and felt something inside him crack completely. The next 2 days were a blur of humiliation. His boss at the marketing firm where he worked called him into the office, expression grave, and explained that given recent family circumstances, they'd decided to restructure his position. The words were corporate doublespeak for firing, but Tucker was too exhausted to fight it. Apparently, Claire's friend Rachel had a big mouth, and the gossip about his parents' theft and flight had spread through their small town like wildfire. People whispered when he walked by. Former friends stopped returning his calls. His landlord, because yes, he was renting his childhood home from his parents, another fact that now felt like calculated cruelty, sent an eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. Gerald called with more bad news. The house wasn't actually his. The transfer his parents mentioned in the note had never been filed. They still owned it, and they'd taken out a home equity line of credit 3 months ago, $60,000, which was now his problem if he wanted to keep the property, which he couldn't afford to do because he'd just lost his job and his savings were exactly $832. Tucker sat in his empty childhood home and took inventory of his life. No parents. No fiancé. No job. No inheritance. No house. No future. The people who were supposed to love him most had systematically destroyed everything he'd built and left him with nothing but debt and shame. The weight of it should have crushed him. Should have driven him to his knees, to despair, to giving up. Instead, something strange happened. Sitting there in the darkness of that stripped house, surrounded by the ghost of his old life, Tucker felt anger crystallize into something harder, something colder, something useful. His parents had done this to teach him independence? Fine. He'd show them what independence really looked like. He'd show them what happens when you burn every bridge and salt the earth behind you. He'd show them that the son they'd abandoned was stronger than the weakness they'd projected onto him. Tucker stood up, his jaw set, his hands steady for the first time in 3 days. They'd taken his money, his security, his family, his love. They'd left him with nothing but rage and determination. They'd meant to break him. They'd meant to force him to fail, to come crawling back to them eventually, to prove their twisted narrative about his dependence. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Tucker pulled out his phone and started making calls. Not to beg for help. Not to complain or cry or seek sympathy. But to start rebuilding from the ashes they'd left him with. If they wanted to teach him a lesson, fine. He'd learn it. But the lesson wouldn't be the one they'd intended. The lesson would be this. When you betray someone completely, you'd better pray they don't survive. Because if they do, they'll come back stronger than you ever imagined possible. And they'll remember everything you took. Tucker found the new number buried in an email his mother had sent from a temporary account before blocking him. She'd been sloppy, emotional, hadn't covered her tracks completely. He stared at the digits for 2 full days before calling, arguing with himself about whether he needed closure or was just opening himself up to more pain. But the questions wouldn't stop circling in his mind. Why? How could they? Did they feel any remorse at all? He called on a Friday night, 3 weeks after finding the empty house, after whiskey had dulled the sharper edges of his anger, but before it could make him stupid. The phone rang 4 times. Tucker was preparing himself for voicemail when his mother answered, her voice tentative and small. Tucker. Hearing her voice, the voice that had read him bedtime stories, that had cheered at his baseball games, that had told him she loved him every single day of his childhood, made something violent rise in his throat. You answered. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. I didn't think you would. Oh, honey. Relief flooded her tone, warm and familiar, as if they were just catching up after a normal separation. I'm so glad you called. I've been hoping you would. How are you doing? Are you settling in okay? Your father and I have been thinking about you so much. Stop. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Don't do that. Don't act like this is normal. Don't ask me how I'm doing like you didn't know exactly how I'd be doing after you cleaned out my trust fund and disappeared without warning. Silence on the other end. Then a sigh, the kind she used to make when he disappointed her as a teenager. Tucker, I know you're upset, but you're not seeing the bigger picture here. The bigger picture? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Enlighten me. What am I missing? His mother's voice shifted, took on that reasoning tone she'd always used when explaining why she knew better than him. Your father and I spent 25 years putting our lives on hold for you. We worked jobs we hated. We stayed in a town we'd outgrown. We sacrificed our dreams, our adventures, our youth, all for you. And you were stagnant, Tucker. Living at home at 25, no ambition, no drive. You were becoming dependent on us. I was living at home because you insisted, Tucker said, his grip on the phone tightening. You said it was smart. You said family takes care of family. You encouraged me to save money, to build my nest egg. I was doing exactly what you told me to do. Another sigh, longer this time, edged with frustration. And that's exactly the problem. You were doing what we told you. You weren't thinking for yourself. You weren't making hard choices. You needed to be forced out of the nest, Tucker. We gave you the greatest gift we could, independence. The chance to stand on your own feet without a safety net. Tucker's chest felt tight, his breathing shallow with suppressed rage. By stealing my inheritance? By abandoning me? By lying and manipulating and destroying everything I had? That was a gift. His voice rose despite his attempt to stay controlled. Mom, you didn't push me out of the nest. You burned the nest down with me in it, and then flew away to watch me fall. You're being dramatic. Her tone hardened, defensive now. The trust fund was just sitting there, Tucker. We needed it to start our new life, and you needed motivation to start yours. It's not theft, it's reallocation of family resources. We're family. Everything we had, we built together. That money wasn't just yours. The gaslighting was so blatant it took his breath away. It was Grandma and Grandpa's money. They left it specifically for me, for my future. You were supposed to be trustees, not beneficiaries. You stole it, Mom. Legally, morally, ethically, you stole it. And you know it. We did what we had to do. Her voice cracked, real emotion breaking through finally. Your father and I were dying in that life, Tucker. Dying. Every day felt like drowning. We had one chance to escape, to finally live the life we'd always dreamed of. And yes, we took your trust fund to do it. But you're young. You have your whole life to rebuild. We don't. Can't you understand that? Can't you see we were desperate? Tucker felt tears prick his eyes, but refused to let them fall. I understand that you chose yourselves over me. I understand that when it came down to it, your comfort mattered more than my future. I understand that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally loved themselves more. His voice dropped to something colder, harder. What I don't understand is how you live with yourselves. How you sleep at night knowing what you did to your own son. Tucker, his mother's voice was pleading now, desperate. Please don't do this. Don't make us the villains. We're your parents. We love you. This was for your own good, even if you can't see it yet. One day you'll have kids, and you'll understand. No. Tucker cut her off, his voice like steel. I won't understand. Because when I have kids, I'll love them more than I love myself. I'll sacrifice for them without keeping score. I'll protect them instead of using them. Everything you did, it wasn't love. It was selfishness dressed up in parent speak to make yourselves feel better about abandoning your son. How dare you? His mother's voice rose, angry now, all pretense of warmth gone. After everything we've done for you? After all the years we spent raising you, clothing you, feeding you, paying for your education? And this is the gratitude we get? We're not perfect, Tucker. We made a choice. We chose ourselves for once. If you can't handle that, if you're going to throw away our entire relationship over money, you threw away the relationship. Tucker was shouting now, 3 weeks of suppressed rage finally exploding. You threw it away when you stole from me. When you lied to me. When you abandoned me without warning and left me with nothing but a note. Don't you dare make this about me being unable to forgive. You're the ones who are unforgivable. The silence that followed was deafening. Tucker could hear his own heartbeat, his ragged breathing, the blood rushing in his ears. When his mother spoke again, her voice was ice cold, all maternal warmth replaced by something cruel and final. You're right, Tucker. We're unforgivable. So stop trying. Stop calling. Stop hoping for some fairy tale reconciliation. We're done. We made our choice, and clearly, you've made yours. Have a nice life. Don't contact us again. The line went dead. Tucker stood in his empty living room, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone like it might transform into his mother's voice calling him back, taking it all back, becoming the mother he'd thought she was instead of the woman she'd revealed herself to be. But the dial tone just droned on, mechanical and indifferent, until he finally lowered the phone and let it fall from his hands onto the floor. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break anything. He just stood there, feeling the last fragile thread connecting him to his parents snap completely. They were gone. Not just physically, not just geographically, but fundamentally, finally, absolutely gone. The people he'd loved his entire life didn't exist anymore, if they ever had. In their place were strangers who'd worn his parents' faces while systematically destroying his life and calling it love. Tucker picked up his phone from the floor, deleted his mother's number, blocked it for good measure, and made himself a promise in the silence of that stripped house. He would never beg them for anything again. Never seek their approval, their love, their acknowledgement. They wanted him to stand on his own feet. Fine. He'd stand. He'd walk. He'd run. And he'd do it so successfully, build something so undeniable, become so much more than they'd ever believed possible, that one day, if they ever came crawling back, he'd have the supreme satisfaction of being the one to say no. The one to close the door. The one to walk away without looking back. His parents had taught him a lesson, all right. Just not the one they'd intended. They'd taught him that blood meant nothing. That trust was a liability. That the only person you could truly depend on was yourself. And Tucker was a very good student. He'd learned the lesson perfectly. Now he'd spend the rest of his life proving it. The warehouse job paid $13 an hour, which meant Tucker's biweekly paycheck after taxes was just enough to cover cheap food, bus fare, and the storage unit where he'd moved the few possessions his parents hadn't taken. He'd lost the house after 30 days exactly, watched from the street as a bank representative changed the locks and posted a foreclosure notice. Everything he'd grown up with, every memory, every moment of assumed security, locked behind a door he could never open again. His friend Marcus had offered him a couch, the kind of offer that came with an expiration date embedded in the invitation. Just until you get on your feet, man, Marcus had said, and Tucker had taken it because pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. The couch was lumpy, smelled faintly of beer and old pizza, and Tucker loved it because it meant he wasn't sleeping in his car. Small victories. He measured his life in small victories now. The warehouse work was brutal, physical in ways his marketing job had never been. 10-hour shifts lifting boxes, operating forklifts, loading trucks in the California heat that made the metal building feel like an oven. His hands developed calluses. His shoulders ached constantly. But Tucker embraced the pain because it was honest, pure cause and effect, work and wage, nothing hidden or manipulative. You showed up, you did the labor, you got paid. Simple. Clean. The opposite of family. His co-workers were mostly men in their 40s and 50s, weathered by decades of physical labor and economic disappointment. They didn't ask about Tucker's background, didn't care that he had a college degree or that he'd once had a white-collar job, and a trust fund, and a fiancé. All that mattered was whether he pulled his weight on the floor. Tucker did. More than pulled his weight, he worked with the manic energy of someone trying to outrun his thoughts. During his lunch breaks, while other workers scrolled through phones or napped in their cars, Tucker sat in the corner with a notebook, teaching himself. He'd grabbed every business book from the library he could carry: Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Lean Startup, 0 to 1, books about investing, about entrepreneurship, about building wealth from nothing. If his parents had taken his financial foundation, fine. He'd build a new one from scratch. He'd become his own safety net. The anger was still there, burning in his chest like a pilot light that never went out. But Tucker had learned to channel it, to use it as fuel instead of letting it consume him. Every box he lifted, every dollar he earned, every page he read, it was all ammunition. He was building something, even if he couldn't see its shape yet. He was moving forward, even if the progress felt microscopic. 3 months into the warehouse job, something shifted. Tucker had been watching the other workers, noticing patterns. The warehouse was chronically disorganized, inefficient in ways that cost time and money. Shipments were frequently late because nobody could find things, because the inventory system was outdated, because the floor layout made no logical sense. One day, during his break, Tucker drew up a proposed reorganization plan: color-coded zones, optimized traffic flow, a simple database system for tracking inventory. He almost threw it away. What did he know about warehouse management? He was just the new guy, the college grad who'd landed here after his life imploded. But the anger whispered, "Show them what you can do. Show everyone what you can do." Tucker left the plan on his supervisor's desk with a note. Saw some inefficiencies. Might help with the late shipment problem. Just thoughts. Tucker. 2 weeks later, the supervisor, a gruff man named Bill who'd worked there for 15 years, called Tucker into the office. Tucker braced himself for mockery or dismissal. Instead, Bill looked at him with something like respect. "This plan you drew up. I showed it to the owner. He wants to implement it. And he wants you to manage the transition." Tucker stared at him. "I've been here 3 months. I'm not a manager." "You are now," Bill said, sliding a paper across the desk. $22 an hour, salaried position. Inventory operations manager. You start Monday. Tucker took the paper with shaking hands, a $9 raise crystallizing before his eyes. It wasn't wealth, wasn't security, but it was forward motion. It was proof that competence mattered more than background. It was the first real win since his world had collapsed. That night, lying on Marcus's couch, Tucker did math in his head. With the raise, he could afford a studio apartment in 6 weeks. Could start saving again, building a nest egg that nobody could touch because it would be in his name only, protected, guarded. The warehouse job wasn't the end point, it was the foundation. He'd take this win, stack another on top of it, then another, building upward brick by brick until he'd constructed something his parents could never tear down. He pulled out his phone and did something he'd been avoiding. He looked up Panama on social media. Found his parents' profiles after 3 minutes of searching. His mother's profile was public, full of photos of their new life. Them on a beach at sunset. Them at an outdoor cafe. Them hiking through rainforest. His father with a cocktail, his mother in a sundress. Both of them smiling like people who'd escaped prison rather than abandoned their son. Tucker stared at those photos for a long time, memorizing the carefree expressions, the expensive vacation aesthetic, the life his stolen inheritance had purchased for them. The anger flared hot and bright, but underneath it was something colder, more patient. They were celebrating, living it up on his money, his future. They thought they'd won, thought they'd gotten away with it. But Tucker knew something they didn't. He knew that money stolen runs out eventually, that paradise built on betrayal has a foundation of sand, that people who flee consequences always find them waiting at the end of the road. And when that day came, when their Panama dream collapsed, when the stolen money dried up, when they realized what they'd traded for temporary comfort, Tucker would be standing on solid ground he'd built himself. He'd be successful, independent, and utterly unreachable. They'd taught him to stand alone. He'd learned the lesson so well that when they finally came crawling back, desperate and broken, he'd already be so far ahead they'd never catch up. Tucker saved his mother's profile to his bookmarks, a reminder of what he was building toward. Then he closed his phone, pulled out his notebook, and went back to planning. Not revenge. Revenge was too emotional, too reactive. This was something purer, colder, more certain. This was success. This was becoming so undeniably complete that their absence became irrelevant. His parents had abandoned him to teach him independence. Fine. He'd become so independent that he'd never need them, never want them, never even think about them except as a cautionary tale about people who mistake cruelty for strength. The warehouse job was just the beginning. Tucker was building an empire from the ashes they'd left him, and when it was finished, when he stood at the top of everything he'd created alone, he'd finally understand the real lesson they'd taught him. That the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's becoming so successful that their existence becomes completely, utterly, beautifully irrelevant. And Tucker was patient. He had all the time in the world to become the man they'd never believed he could be. The man they'd created when they tried to destroy him.